Alright, so in the past I've made videos talking about the Resident Evil 4 remake. I've talked about things that could change, I've talked about things that people don't want to change, I've talked about things that I want to see, and now we're going to be talking about things that most of the fans want to see, like the more general kind of audience want to see. I've mentioned it a million times already, but Resident Evil 4 is held in such high regard by so many people, even, people who are not massive Resident Evil fans, but like this game. There's such a bigger audience to this game compared to a lot of others, so a lot of pressure is there to make this right and make it good. So let's talk about some ideas that people want to see implemented into the remake and just discuss them in general. So without any further ado, let's just jump into it. So let's start with something simple. A lot of people do think Resident Evil 4 does not need a remake, and if you've played the game recently and even seen the game recently, it does make sense as to why that's the case. Yeah, even now, I played the game a couple weeks ago, streamed it a couple weeks ago, and it still looks good, it still plays good, it still feels really nice, and there is other games in the series that people love so much that would probably be more benefited by having a remake made for them. I think the two that spring to mind for me personally is Code Veronica. People really want that remade, and Outbreak as well. They're the two that I feel that deserve a bit more attention than the RE4 remake, but at the end of the day, this is Capcom's big fish, basically. This is the game everyone talks about, so it makes sense to remake this because money will come from this, regardless. On that note though, people do just want, really, a visual improvement. So obviously Resident Evil 4 running on the RE engine, which looks incredible. Obviously RE2 and 3 remakes run on it, 7 and 8 run on it, as well as a couple other Capcom games like Monster Hunter Rise and stuff like that. And all those games look really good, so I'd imagine Resident Evil 4 running on RE engine would look really nice as well. And on top of that, obviously, the simple one, the modern controls, again, how Resident Evil 2 and 3 play, just a more modern third-person control scheme, with the option maybe to switch between the remake control scheme and the old-school control scheme. I think that would be a pretty nice touch. Next up, people do want Ashley to be a bit more useful in certain situations, or at least have an improved AI. I'm not too sure what people mean by it, but some kind of suggestions would be that she kind of doesn't stick to you like glue anymore, like she has her own brain in a sense. Like if she's in danger, she'll kind of move instead of just standing there and taking it. Maybe a few more commands together as well instead of just stop and go. Maybe, you can kind of signal her to pick up a rock or some kind of melee weapon, and use it of course to stun a Ganado that may be kind of sneaking up on you, or something that's just out of your vision. That would be pretty useful, as well as maybe having her own smaller inventory where you can kind of order her to pick up herbs you see that you don't have space for, and she can heal you at points where you're pretty low and she's around, or just kind of hold them for you until you run out, and basically acts as a moving inventory box, basically. Personally, I would say with Resident Evil 4 we have right now, the AI for Ashley is fine. She doesn't really get in the way. You can accidentally shoot her or stuff like that. Sometimes she gets grabbed or hit by things that really shouldn't be grabbing or hitting her, but it's just a thing of its time, I guess, with the AI. But having an improved AI for her would be pretty good, but we'll just have to wait and see. I briefly mentioned it earlier, but having the options to revert things back to the original version, for example the control scheme, having an option to play on a more modern control scheme or the old school control scheme. I'd imagine they'll probably update the soundtrack, so again, just like RE2 Remake did, have an option to pick the original soundtrack or the remake soundtrack, which would be pretty cool. And basically anything like that where you have an option to use the original or the modern version would be pretty cool. One thing I've seen a lot of people mention, especially recently, is trying to implement some of the stuff that was from the cut version of RE4. If you don't know what that is, there's an old build of Resident Evil 4 that a lot of people call the Hookman / hallucination build. It was a kind of fixed camera, kind of more like Code Veronica in a sense, so where the camera's on a dolly system. And some enemies were there. Some were ghosts, which we'd only see in hallucinations, and one specifically was a Hookman, which would basically, carry a massive hook and follow you around. Quite simple, really. And people would like to see the implementation of either that character or some other cut stuff from that early build. I think that's definitely an interesting idea. I think with a remake, you want to add stuff rather than take stuff away. Resident Evil 3 being the case in point, that game is still quite fun, the remake anyway, but so much is missing from the original that it feels kind of weird. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying there's a lot missing. So with the remake, I would personally say, add more than what you cut out, basically. On top of that, make Lewis a playable character, give him in his own kind of section of the game. Maybe when he goes back to get the vaccine, when you're at the castle, you play that scenario out and see what happens. Maybe you can pick between playing as Leon or Louis in the cabin fight. That would be pretty cool. Just give him a bit of an opportunity to be playable. And another thing I've seen mentioned is try and add some of the separate ways parts of the DLC into the main game, like when it makes sense to. The main point of that DLC that I'm kind of seeing people say add into the main game is when you refight Krauser as Ada, and then she arrives to help Leon near the end of the game deal with Sadler. That would be pretty cool, just to add that into the game instead of it being like a separate kind of mode. That being said though, obviously don't remove separate ways, keep it in the game, but if you can add any of that into the main campaign, definitely kind of try and fit that in. A few extra things that are kind of smaller is more costume choices, more unlockable items, such as bonus weapons, bonus modes, stuff like that. One thing people really seem to like is something that was introduced in the 3 remake, I believe, which was the challenge point store. Basically, the game would have a load of challenges you could do, whether it was kind of speed runs or knife only or no healing and stuff like that, and you would earn points for that, and basically you would be able to go into the store in the game and buy bonus weapons, costumes and stuff like that. People really like that system, and I am quite a big fan as well, so having that in the 4 remake would be pretty good. It would add a lot more replayability to the game to unlock everything, and it's an all-round positive thing. But yeah, they're basically the main things that people want to see. Obviously there's more than that, but they're kind of like the more dominant ones I see online. I think there's a lot of pressure riding on this, like I said. You know, there's a huge amount of fans for Resident Evil 4. Not everyone. I know there's plenty of people out there that don't like Resident Evil 4. But I think for the most part, there is a more positive side of the fan base than a negative side of the fan base in terms of Resident Evil 4. So there's a lot of, you know, the stakes are high to make the game as good as it possibly can be. Do I think it really needs a remake? Probably not. I think literally if they just change the controls, that'd be fine. But even then, you know, they're not too bad anyway, like, they're fine. But either way, do let me know if there's anything else you want to see in the 4 remake that I didn't mention. Is there anything you want to see that not many other people would agree with? Is there anything on the list I said that you don't agree with? Always interested to know people's thoughts about this, because this is a big deal. This is a big deal, and hopefully there's an announcement this year. Apparently there is. I think most people are kind of agreeing that there's going to be an announcement this year with the release of next year, so it's not too far away now, really. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. But as always, thank you all for coming by. Remember to leave your thoughts in the comments down below, and subscribe for more Resident Evil content. Whenever there is news on the 4 remake, or any future releases for Resident Evil, I'll probably post it immediately, or as soon as possible for me. So if news is your thing, then why not subscribe? But yeah, thank you for coming by, and I'll catch you all tomorrow for a brand new video.